Hey, thank you for joining me. I came across a video yesterday that was quite thought provoking insofar as I think it exemplifies something that happens every day all over the world. Not this something particularly, but just a social dynamic, which is rude people. Basically, in the video, it's recorded by a guy and his female companion, whether that's his wife or girlfriend, I don't know. But basically, they're looking for a parking space in a parking lot somewhere in British Columbia, Canada, but I'm not sure specifically where. Anyway, they're trying to find a parking space, mundane, everyday thing. And this woman suddenly runs into the space, literally runs in. And she then starts insisting that she was saving the space. And there's a bit of a back and forth argument here. The driver is flabbergasted by this. He thinks this is just not normal. You can't just do that. So they're arguing. Then another woman appears and they start arguing. Well, after about 2.5 minutes, the guy leaves. I'll put a link in this video. It's went viral, and about 90% of people are supporting the driver because of the fact that this is just not the conventional thing to do, to run into a space physically and take it. As he said, it's a car parking space, not a woman parking space. I have to say, I found the woman's behaviour incredibly obnoxious. I mean, it would be one thing if she was sort of already there. Even that would be unconventional. But the fact is, she ran into the space. She could see him about to pull in. She literally ran in. It's almost comical. And a lot of people were proposing different solutions. Some were saying he could come back 15 minutes later and slash her tires, which is a bit of a dramatic approach, perhaps. Others were saying he could slowly move forward. That way, there's no, if it's on a dash cam, there's no, he couldn't be pinned down on aggressive driving if he was doing it slowly, and they would soon get the hint. Others were saying just, go asleep and she'll eventually get bored. Now, the guy said he had all day. I don't know if that was true or not. I don't know if he was just saying that to get her to leave. But certainly, I feel her behaviour was very obnoxious. It's just not the convention. It's just not the way you do things. If you don't get the parking space, you don't get it. If someone else gets there first. And to be clear here, we're not talking about two cars where one car may have been there first or something like that. We're talking about a person physically running into the space. It's utterly absurd. Um, so I don't know who these women thought they were. This sort of entitled mentality that they thought they could do that. Anyway, it's all over the internet now. So if they go around behaving like this, hopefully they'll get a little bit of a peaceful backlash, i.e., frankly named and shamed, because I think it's very selfish behaviour. Um, but it got me thinking about the wider issue of etiquette and just rude people. Um, Anyone who's worked in sort of public service, whether that be a shop or you've worked with members of the public, will know that you get a real plurality of characters. You get some very polite, decent people. The vast majority of people are just normal. They make their purchase and they go on. But you get people who are just plain rude. And it's not just from the point of view of being a server or an assistant. You get as a customer as well. You can see both sides. You get plain rude customers and you get plain rude assistants. To give an example, I was in a store a while back in the UK, and it was a discount store, and it really got my nerves because they had marked the item on the shelf and the price was directly below the item. So I was adding this up in my head for the total. Then when it came to the till, I said no, that total's wrong because I've already added this up, and they had me double guessing myself. Oh well, maybe I made a mistake. So I went back, double checked. No, I was right. Now the girl on the till didn't even have the decency to apologize and say, "Oh, sorry, we got that wrong," or her attitude was, "Oh, it's not my fault." But the thing is, if you're representing a shop, it doesn't matter if you personally put the label there or not. The point is you're a representative, so you're meant to, at the very least, apologize to the customer for the inconvenience. I mean, it was frustrating because there was me standing on the spot. The other customers were looking. They don't know if I made a mistake or not. And as it turned out, I didn't. They just can't be bothered to put the labels in the right place. It's one thing that does irritate me, and a lot of shops are guilty of this, of misplacing the labels. You see, these sort of things, in the grand scheme of things, are not that important. We're not talking about war or famine or human rights abuses, these sort of very serious issues. We're talking about everyday mundane things. But rudeness versus politeness can make a big difference. Now, if she had turned around and said, "Oh, sorry, we made a mistake," I would have totally taken that a different way. I would have said, "Okay, well, mistakes happen. That's a human error. No problem." But as it stood, she basically tried to blame me, and it was really not on. But you see this in everyday walks of life. Now, every country has different standards of what is considered rude and what is not, and what might be considered acceptable in one country is not acceptable in another. Now, there was a slight racial dynamic to that video I mentioned because the women involved were they looked to be Chinese or of Chinese descent. Now, I have to say, a lot of the Asian people commenting on the thread were saying, "Oh, as a Chinese, they do not represent me. These women are rude." And they were actually basically admitting, yes, some Chinese are very rude. I'm always a little wary about getting into generalizations because China is a huge country. Um, but I think there is a bit of a behavioral issue there, and I think it is a byproduct of the one child generation. There is, frankly, a lot of Chinese people of a certain generation who have an entitled mindset. And sometimes they do come to Western countries and think they can behave whatever way they want. But, before anyone accuses me of racial stereotyping, there are Westerners who behave that way as well. I mean, there's Westerners who go to Asian countries and get themselves ridiculously drunk, make an ass out of themselves. I know from my experience when I was working in China, I saw the behavior of some fellow Western teachers and I was embarrassed by it. They just get themselves really drunk and throw up and in front of our Chinese hosts, and I found it very embarrassing. So basically, you get people like this all over the world, and they just don't think about the consequences of their actions. You get many examples of this. Talking in the cinema, people who loudly talk during the cinema. Um, People in the UK, it's kind of seen as polite when you're walking through a shopping centre to hold the door open behind you. Most people realise this and most people do it. Some people just let the door fly in the face of the person behind them. Or another thing is they don't bother saying thank you. Now, one accusation that's sometimes levelled at the British is we're too polite. I mean, in an exchange in a shop, you might hear please and thank you 3 or 4 times. So maybe we do overdo it a little bit. But I also feel that that is not entirely a bad thing. That degree, like a certain degree of politeness. If someone holds open a door for me, I kind of nod my appreciation. It's not about overdoing it. It's just about acknowledging common decency. That's all. And I don't have much time for people who cannot bring themselves to say thank you ever. I think there's something seriously wrong with such people. It's not about going over the top and saying, "Oh, thank you so much." It's just kind of, it's just common sense, like a nod of courtesy or something like that. And I do notice some people just have a bad attitude. Another thing that irritates me is when someone asks a question but they can't just say, "Excuse me." It's like, "Do you have this? Do you have that?" Well, what's wrong with "excuse me"? A lot of people just don't have basic manners. And I'm no prude. I don't go around, it's not about being ultra polished and ultra overdoing it. That's not the issue. It's just about basic common sense manners. If I go to another country, I do my homework. I find out, well, what is deemed to be acceptable, what's not deemed to be acceptable, and I try to abide by that. I think certainly people who are visiting other countries need to respect the local culture. I always say that for my fellow Britons, and sometimes my fellow Britons are badly behaved abroad, some of them. And I must admit, I get annoyed with some people who come from other countries and don't respect some of our standard uh, cultural traits, so to speak. I mean, there is just a mentality of entitlement that a lot of people have. and it's really quite frustrating. You see this, like I say, across the board. Men's toilets. I have to be honest, this is something that's leveled at my gender, and it's very true. The number of times I've been in a cubicle and the seat's covered in piss. I mean, come on, guys. Just piss into the bowl. It's not hard. Because what I'm thinking of is, well, okay, the cleaner is paid to do it, but that doesn't mean, just because someone's paid to do something doesn't mean that you have to give them extra work, that you have to have such a pig ignorant, selfish. Ah, it does irritate me, I must admit. Um, no, I don't want to be overly cynical. Most people are thoughtful, most people do consider others, but that selfish minority, um, it's one of those things like in itself, these things are very trivial, but when they add up, it does impact other people, and it's just plain selfish. And I think there's a variety of reasons for it. Definitely, their upbringing's part of it. I think often there's an entitlement mentality. Probably they grew up their parents giving them everything they want. That's why I'm very skeptical of the mode of parenting, which is, oh, my little Tracy or my little Kevin can get whatever they want. Isn't it so cute that they're running around pestering strangers? No, it's not. They're your children, your responsibility, no excuses. I must admit, I take quite a hard line with that. And I'm not Victor Meldrew. I like kids. I've got a niece and nephew. I get on very well with them. But there is a degree of common sense that when you have children, you have the responsibility. So I think there's a lot of dynamics in this. And then, of course, they get into adulthood and they've been brought up with this prince or princess mentality. So they expect the rest of society to treat them that way. And it's just pig ignorant and quite frustrating. But like I say, when it comes to the dynamic of public service, you get it on both sides. You get people who work in companies who have a bad attitude to customers, and you get customers who have a bad attitude. I mean, there's many examples of this, and I'm going to round this up soon. But let's say, for example, in airports. Now, this is one of those things I kind of see both sides. Let's say you have a flight is delayed. You do sympathize with passengers because it's a very stressful thing traveling. Maybe your bags have been delayed or damaged. Maybe you've been waiting around, you haven't got connections, and you're just very tired and you just want to get home. It is unpleasant. And I think it's a responsibility for airport staff to be as courteous as possible and to give the information. In fact, this might warrant another video. But then, so from that point of view, I think that's their responsibility to be understanding of the position the passengers are in. However, you also get, I've seen passengers getting really aggressive and yelling, like really yelling in the face of some assistant who's only the messenger. They haven't delayed the flight, they're just passing on the information. And then you get passengers ganging up on them. It's a bit, I think you need tough skin to work in that sort of industry and in a busy shop environment for that matter. And it does, I think some people just lack any sort of empathy. Like, we all have a breaking point. We all, even the most patient people, at some point will lose their temper. People vary a lot. Some people are always blowing their casket. Some people are ultra patient, and most people are probably around the middle. I would say I'm around the middle. Um, but we all have a line, and I think empathy goes a long way. Just putting yourself in someone else's shoes and thinking, well, they're trying their best. They're under pressure. What good is yelling at them going to do? So I think empathy is very, very important. Trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes, and also reflecting on yourself. Maybe thinking, oh, was I in the wrong there? You know, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with self-reflection. There have been times when I've lost my temper and I felt a bit guilty afterwards because I thought, well, maybe I overreacted. There's other times when I felt I was too passive and I should have been a bit more assertive and, not tolerated it. So, yeah, it comes down to assertiveness, empathy, and just being a decent human being, trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes and not doing things that are going to piss other people off. That's all. And I think that people who do that do need to be shamed and challenged peacefully. because if they're not, they'll go through life continuing to do it if no one stands up to them. That's why this guy, in my opinion, was right to film this exchange. And hopefully, the woman who, was throwing herself into the parking lot will think twice, because that's not normal behavior. It's not acceptable, and it's not the protocol. It's not the conventional way to approach that. It would be different if she had a vehicle. She keeps, oh no, my vehicle's over there. No, you can't just run into a space and claim it's yours. So let me know your thoughts. What I'm interested in hearing, actually, what country are you in, and what sort of things are considered polite or rude in your country? In the UK, I would use that as an example, holding the door open in shopping centres. Busy shopping centre. It's generally an unwritten code that Britons know. We just hold the door open for the next person, whoever they are. Young, old, male, female. It's just considered polite. So let me know in what part of the world you're in, what is considered to be polite, what's considered to be rude. And thank you for watching.